When I first started producing, I used to think that my mixes were the problem, but it turns out 90% of the time, it was my arrangements. I'd stack 40 layers and wonder why my songs sounded terrible. And so if you've ever felt like you're not finishing tracks or they're just not sounding rich and full the way you want them to, I'm confident these 7 arrangement techniques will level up your tracks instantly. And honestly, they're really simple, but they completely change the way that I produce. Let's dive in. So arrangement technique number 1 is split chords. A few years back, an engineer I was working with at Sony Australia noticed I was doing this in a bunch of my tracks. It wasn't something I was doing intentionally, but he told me it was something he learnt from Zed. Instead of stacking the notes of a chord on one sound, split each note across different instruments. It adds width and will give you that pro polish instantly. So I want to show you an example of this. If we've got just a basic set of chords like this, if you were to take, for instance, the third of each chord and use a different synth, perhaps a lead like this one, you'd get something like this. And what I've done in this one to replicate It's Okay, I'm Okay by Tate McRae is add another couple of thirds, but with different colors, different textures of synths. This is what it sounds like with all of them together. And so you can really see how this has just given so much life to that chord progression. And of course, remember, it's not only limited to thirds. You could, of course, use the fifth, or you could add extensions like ninths and 11ths, whatever works for you and matches the mood of your track. So arrangement technique number 2, pedal tones. Hold a single note, try maybe the first, fifth, or ninth while the chords change. It really glues everything together and gives it that emotion. If we play the chord progression without the pedal tones, this is what it sounds like. And then if we add the pedal tone in, both a higher and lower octave, playing the first of the relative major scale, this is what it sounds like. So you can actually choose to omit the third from the majority of those chords, but the short version is you can basically hold that first note, second note, or ninth of the tonic major scale, depending on what key you're in, and you can hold it throughout the progression to really get that feeling. Just as an example, if you're in A minor, you'd want to look for the first, fifth, and ninth note of the C major scale, as it's the relative major of A minor. Arrangement technique number 3, contrast textures. If one synth is super bright, pair it with something darker. Even a really small shift in width and color can really create that depth. So if we hop over to my remake of Golden, we have a look at the chords that are happening here. So let's bring the synths in one by one. We've got the first one here. It's really mellow. Then we have the choir pad. It's a lot brighter than that previous pad. And then what we're going to do next is exceed that brightness just to really take it out of the space and really separate it from the previous two. So this is what it sounds like. As you can see, it's not a sound that you would pick right off the bat to start a song with. What we've done is basically use it as a textural addition to what we already had. And so for the last one, we're going to go for something a little more mid-heavy. This is what it sounds like. Then without. So it's really giving it that depth. Here it is again. Technique number 4, the reslayer. Add a subtle respace under your sub or 808. It fills the low mids and adds stereo movement without muddying the sub bass. So if we have a quick look at the 808 and drums from It's Okay, I'm Okay, this is what it sounds like. And then we add a very subtle, even transparent respace underneath that 808. This is what it sounds like. Give it a bit of volume. You can be really creative with that one. You can go much bigger with the Reese and sort of its movement, and you can really get away with it because the 808 is still keeping that low-end foundation down the middle. Now, you might be asking how to get them to sit without clashing, without the low end sort of getting super muddy. So if you're using something like Serum for the sub bass, simply go to the pencil icon on each oscillator. This one only has one. Click on it, go to Process, and head down to Remove Fundamental. What this does is essentially remove that fundamental information so it doesn't clash with the fundamental in the 808 or sub bass. And it's a really great way to keep your layered basses super clean. So moving on to arrangement technique number 5, leave space for the snare. The idea here is to pull elements out. Maybe keep the bass going, but drop it out every time the snare hits, or the bass keeps going, and maybe the pads only go for half the bar. These small silences are what's going to make the next hit feel huge. And I think a track that demonstrates this really well is Sports Cars. This is what it sounds like. Notice the bass and how it's stopping and leaving room for the snare. So at the start, it stops right at the snare, and then it breaks for another half a bar or so. So this is what it sounds like. And it's not only giving room for the snare, it's also allowing a lot of those tom hits to really breathe. And that's really why this track sounds so massive. There's really a lot of space for every individual instrument. If I'm maybe feeling a song is getting a little bit stale, or maybe there's not enough rhythmic interest within it, what I'll typically do is just automate the on-off button from any particular track. In this case, we'll use the pluck, which sounds like this. And basically on every snare, I'm just going to drop it out and see how it sounds. So if we were to do it in this case, this is what it would sound like. And while something like that might not work as well, the principle's still the same. Just really try and automate that on and off button and see what variations you get. And what you'll find is that you'll stumble upon that right balance between having that silence and of course letting the instrument play. You can get some really cool grooves this way, so I highly recommend you give that a go. And so moving on to arrangement technique number 6, atmospheric layers. Try layering a subtle pad underneath your piano chords. It can turn something that feels maybe a little bit dry or a little narrow into something that's really, really spacious and has a lot of depth to it. So I'll show you an example just with a dry piano. This is what it sounds like. And so first, I'm just going to bring in one layer, just a very, very simple pad, and it sounds like this. And of course, notice it's playing exactly what the piano's playing, so this is what they sound like together. And then what we can do is get a little more creative and add a sort of shimmer at the very top. And we can do that with a really sort of atmospheric sound. I've used one in Noir Felt, and it's called Ambient Felt, and it sounds like this. So it sort of sounds like extended overtones of that piano, but it's really, really cool, really atmospheric, and this is what they all sound like together. And arrangement technique number 7 is automation. And so you might not think that automation is a part of arrangement, but it really can shape the way different sections flow into each other. So I thought I'd include it. For example, automating the filter cutoff on each individual chord can have a massive impact on how the section feels and how it interacts with other instruments. So this is what it sounds like in isolation. So if you go a little more extreme with that and take the filters down like this, in context, it's almost as if there's no instrument there for the first half of the bar. At least that's how the listener perceives it, but it gradually building towards the end of the bar is really a nice, subtle addition to a very kind of sparse mix. If we flip over to this drum track, we can see how we're using automation to really round out this section and bring it to a close. So this is what it sounds like in isolation. So definitely doing that at the end of choruses or just big sections that really need to kind of come to a close. This is a really, really cool technique. And again, super basic, but really works well. And it's a great way to create that kind of flow between sections and give you tracks that finished kind of feeling. You can do the same thing if you automate a high pass filter. So this is really good before a drop or even before a section that repeats. So this is what it sounds like in isolation. And of course, that can be refined, but you can definitely do that with your basses, synths, drums, whatever it may be. And it can start to give your entries a lot more impact, particularly if you're taking out a lot of lower frequencies. When the next section hits with all of those low frequencies back in, it's going to hit a lot harder. Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, check out this one up here. I think you'll really enjoy it too. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.